Cortland Simmons with you here on the 10th day of August in the year of our Lord 2018. And what I want to talk about a little bit is how we've believed over the years there's been a weakening of the breed. And with race state medications, something that is kind of outlawed in Europe, that has been an effect, sort of a symptom or a casualty of why we've seen more breakdowns with the hard, fast racetracks. Synthetic tracks were brought in, and it was met with a little bit of skepticism from certain trainers. I mean, even Hall of Famers like Wayne Lucas and Bob Baffert were not really enthralled by synthetic racetracks because a lot of their horses, particularly with Baffert, were horses that had a tendency, the speed was very, very beneficial to them in the current configuration on standard dirt racetracks. You couple that with the fact that synthetics came and went, even though there are still some venues that have that surface, whether it be the Tapeta or the Pro Ride and so forth. In Europe, those surfaces are used widespread when conducting some dirt racing, which is kind of, at the smaller percentages, at a lower percentage in terms of European racing, which is top heavy with turf events. The main surface is grass over there, and here in America it's considered to be the second tier of racing, that the dirt horses are considered to be the best. The biggest problem that we have is this insulated, sort of Americanized mentality, small town mentality of, well, we have the best horses, and it's confirmed by the fact that outfits from all over the world attend the Keeneland sales, and in this case, at press time of this telecast, the Fasig-Tipton Saratoga sale at the boutique meet there at Saratoga Springs, which is had a lot of buzz with American Pharoah. Horses from his first crop still coming out. Bob Baffert spent over $1 million with the Coolmore gang to buy an American Pharoah, and he's done very, very well. Medagliadoro had a tremendous day on day 2, and so forth. But the biggest problem, one of the things that has been a widespread belief, a blanket belief for years and years, still to this day, is that, well, the Europeans in particular have taken all of our best horses, and that's why we can't get Triple Crown winners and superstars. And that is somewhat true, but misguided in many ways. And it's, it speaks to grandiose, self-absorbed, arrogant, small town mentality and sort of Americanized viewpoint, in terms of, how, it has, adversely affected U.S. racing. Here's where the problem is in that belief system, that system of belief, of core beliefs. The problem is that when you look at what the Europeans are doing versus criticizing them or criticizing Keeneland and Fasig-Tipton and Barrett's and all these other top sales for having an open market where buyers from all over the world can come in and buy the horses that they think are worthy of spending good money on, is the fact that Aidan O'Brien gets these horses from MV Magnier and Michael Tabor and all these other groups of people, Sheikh Mohammed, the Godolphin guys, and his brothers and cousins, that have over the years, really fueled the market and galvanized it in many ways. What they've done is taken horses, American horses with, top heavy dirt pedigrees, although most pedigrees will show a little bit of turf and dirt prowess, some more than others, and some will show more tendency to have stamina in that family tree than other individuals. And what's interesting is, back in those days, in the good old days, in American racing, horses ran on the dirt and the turf quite often. Not so much to show versatility, because economically it was very, very imperative to do that, because the economics of racing weren't then what they are today. You had to run more times to accumulate, some serious stacks in terms of cash flow. But what was great for the fans was you'd see a horse like Kelso run in the Washington, D.C. International on the turf, which was one of the marquee events on the grass, in which you saw great horses from Europe funnel in. And you saw that Secretariat, of course, had his forays on the lawn and did very, very well. And unfortunately, and Curlin's one of the last, superstars from the Triple Crown or one of these top-end dirt horses that ran on the turf, lost to Red Rocks, a Breeders' Cup turf winner, in the Man of War at Belmont Park. But it was a noble thing for Steve Asmussen, his trainer, and his ownership group to run him on the turf. And I think that's what we need to see more of. Here's the problem, though. The pedigrees, of course, lent itself to having more horses, and Europe has taken advantage of that And what's happened is that even horses like Coolmore have acquired at these sales that are top heavy in even dirt pedigrees like Stormcat, for example, but there's some turf influence as well. They've taken these Americanized horses and they've acclimated these individuals to their style of racing, which is primarily the turf, and made superstars of them. And you can go down the list from Giant's Causeway and horses like Van Nistelrooy and so forth. And they have done a wonderful job of showing people what you can do with these horses, rather than it being a situation of, well, they're taking our horses. What's interesting is that there's not a overwhelming presence of American ownership groups, trainers, in conjunction with them to make these purchases, to say, wait a minute, why don't we go to Tattersall's and Deauville, France, and go to the golf sales and acquire some European horses and get out of this mentality of, well, when we get them, these are horses we're going to run on the turf. Sure, you have to be encouraged, given their pedigrees and their performances to match, that they're going to run well on the turf. But, how about, wait a minute, we just want horses that can stay and have turn of foot. Because one thing about Europe, what's interesting is, you've seen horses over the years, run the flat mile and then jump up to the mile and a half. Not every horse can do that. See the Stars is a perfect example. That's why the English Triple Crown is so hard to win. The 2,000 Guineas, the Epsom Derby, and the St. Leger. They're spread out over it's spread out over a longer succession of weeks. It's not a 5-week compression, but you have to keep your horse in top form, because the gap between the Epsom Derby and the St. Leger is about almost a 3-month break. And so interestingly enough, what's exciting about European racing is that horses don't usually go. Camelot in 2012 tried to go for the Triple Crown that year and failed in the St. Leger. A lot of horses don't go for the Triple Crown, but what's interesting in Europe is that it's not held against horses to not go in the St. Leger. That is a lung-busting, mile and 3/4, almost 2-mile race. And Nijinsky, of course, was the last to sweep the series. Nashwan won the 2,000 Guineas and the Epsom Derby in '89, but didn't go for the Triple Crown. But you look at all these great races in between, whether it be the Irish Derby, the Eclipse, those two races are very close in weeks, and so you can't run in both. But between the Irish Derby and the Eclipse, you've seen horses, whether they've doubled in the 2,000 Guineas or Epsom, or have run in one of the preps and skipped, Newmarket, where the 2,000 Guineas is held, and run in the Dante or the Lingfield Derby trial to get ready for the Epsom Derby. And then subsequently, there's these other great races, the Epsom Irish Derby Double. A lot of horses try to go for the Irish Derby, or they go against older horses in the Eclipse. Subsequently, we've seen a lot of those horses, whether they've run in either one of those two events, go on and face older horses in Ascot's marquee event, the King George and Queen Elizabeth Diamond Stakes, at 1.5 miles, which goes to my point. American races have been shortened in distance, the Jockey Club Gold Cup chief among them. And we've lightened the weights, so there's no more great weight carriers, which could be argued is maybe a good thing, that we eliminate or knock down or reduce the prospect of breakdown by carrying these incredible weights like Forgo carried and Kelso did back in the day. But we've shortened our races, and Europe has stayed true, with the exception maybe of the French Derby, which I think is 1.25 miles now. They have stayed true to their 1.5 mile races staying 1.5 miles. But what I was getting at before I got a little off track is that what's interesting is that they have mile races, which shows you have to show a little stamina, but a lot of acceleration, because it's a mile. You have horses that can go from 6 to 7 furlongs and can condition themselves from a fitness standpoint to go a mile. Then what's interesting is you have a lot of these horses that can go 10 furlongs or go 12. See, the Stars went from the 8 to the 12 with no prep in between, because there's only a 5-week window. And so you have this incredibly freaky hybrid of speed, power, and stamina. And this is something that, as I've said before, is a tremendous missed opportunity. Now, if you want to go YouTube, the best Arc de Triomphe winners, best Irish Derby and Epsom Derby winners in 2000, you go to YouTube and you look at those videos and you look at some of the stunning performances. Unfortunately, for a lot of the horses that shock the world with these incredible death-defying efforts, a lot of these horses, some are deceased, some are, of course, have gotten too old in age to be viable stallions now. But when you start getting into the last 10 to 15 years, there is still a ton of what we call continuing bloodline power in the European horses, whether it be Sadler's Well, who just passed a few years ago. Giant's Causeway passed this year. He's of the Stormcat line, but Sadler's Wells was a son of Northern Dancer, was a very, very good Group 1 winner. Wasn't a legend, but it was a very nice horse. And then he, of course, subsequently produced all these horses that can go a mile and a half, whether it be Galileo, whether it be Islington, and so forth, and High Chaparral. And since then, High Chaparral, of course, has since passed. He didn't quite live up to the standard that they were hoping for as a stallion, but we all know what Galileo's doing. He is sort of solidifying Sadler's Wells' legend of being not only a tremendous stallion, but a sire of sires, because Galileo is just blowing things up all over the world. And of course, chief among his best progeny being Frankel, named after the late Bobby Frankel, one of our great U.S. conditioners. And it is incredible, the pedigrees. And Galileo was by a mare by the name of Urban Sea, filly who won the Arc de Triomphe in 1993. That's where I'm going with this. Not only do you have sire power that has some Americanized ingredients, in addition to being homegrown, European blood, blue-blooded, livestock, the bloodstock, but you have these horses that are incredibly strong on the dam side, the dam being the mother. You've got these incredible fillies that have stamina. That's the thing about Europe. They have both speed and stamina. You have horses like Goldakova, of course, who was more of a speed horse, but then you have horses like Oh So Sharp or Pebbles, a horse that could go anywhere from a mile to a mile and a half. And so you have these horses of the recent years like Treve and Zarkava and Ouija Board and Found, who was just retired, won the 2016 Arc de Triomphe out of the Aidan O'Brien barn. Horses of that high caliber, seriously, incredibly talented horses. So when you go to Europe, you are going to get, on some level, if not those horses, some really nice horses that competed against them that might not have been multiple Group 1 winners, but were very competitive. Even Ouija Board didn't win as many Group 1s as probably she could have if she had just stayed, strictly, exclusively run against her own sex, or had even come to the United States and stayed in the filly and mare turf division. So when you have horses like that, when you have a deck like that to pluck from, you're going to get some serious horses. And for any American that still believes that there's no way that I can, get a horse out of one of those sales and produce a Kentucky Oaks, Kentucky Derby type of horse, is absolutely one of the most, as I said before, one of the most narrow-minded and what I call tactical blunders from a business standpoint